So good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Saurabh Vatsa. I am an assistant professor in the Department of History, Shaheed Bhagat Singh College, and I'm here to talk to you about the preliminary examination of the UPSC Civil Services, which I think is scheduled for 24th of this month. And I'm just going to share certain guidelines about the paper. I'm going to tell you about the paper, certain mistakes that people tend to do in the paper, and a couple of tricks that may help you once you approach this particular paper. So to begin with, let's start with the basics. The first thing is that there are two papers. There is the GS paper 1 and there is the GS paper 2. As I'm sure everybody who has been preparing for some time knows that there are 100 questions in GS paper 1 and there are 80 questions in GS paper 2. This is a qualifying paper, which means you need to secure 33% marks in this particular paper. This does not determine your rank. You just have to qualify the paper. However, please be careful. Just to share a small data with you, every year around 1,500 to 2,000 people actually fail to clear the prelims because they fail to clear this paper. So ये ध्यान रहे कि इस paper को ignore नहीं करना है हमें. We just have to be strategic about how we go about and attempt this paper. So that's the basic. Now, a question which every fresher and even veteran candidates of the exam often try to think about, or are often, they're bothered by this question: what is the cutoff that usually one has to target? What is the cutoff which helps you clear the preliminary examination? So if I'm talking historically, remember, cutoffs have been as low as 37 questions out of 100 questions in GS paper 1. And I'm sure by now you have understood that your merit is going to be decided only by GS paper 1. This is only a qualifying paper. You just have to qualify this paper. The merit is determined by GS paper 1. So out of the 100 questions that you have in GS paper 1, remember, cutoffs have been as low as 37, which means you have to just do 37 questions correctly. And they have been also as high as 70 marks. So this is, if I'm not wrong, I think 2014 की जो cutoff गई थी, it was 140 marks out of 200. I think it was slightly higher. I think it was 146. So this is the broad range where the cutoffs have actually, historically, they lie between this particular range. Now, why am I telling you cutoff? I'm telling you cutoff of the examination so that you understand that you don't have to think about the cutoff. Don't go into the examination hall thinking about the cutoff, because the cutoff changes every year. It depends upon the quality of the questions. It depends upon how difficult the paper is. So remember, this is just a very broad idea that you must have. Don't get bogged down by इससे परेशान नहीं होना है कि 37 questions तो मुझे करने ही हैं या 70 करने ही हैं. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. It is all very subjective. It changes from year to year, but broadly ये range रहती है. I'll also be talking to you about what is a safe score. At what score can you actually expect to clear the preliminary examination to a certain extent, regardless of the difficulty of the paper. If you hit that magical number, you will be able to most probably clear the examination. Now, so coming to the next important, we have dealt with the basics of the paper. We have dealt with the cutoffs. The next important thing that we're going to talk about is, what is a good attempt? How many questions do you actually attempt in the preliminary examination in the GS paper 1? So remember, it is a paper which has negative marking. So for every 3 questions, you lose 1 mark. If you do 3 wrong questions, you end up losing 1 mark. Okay? So now we come into this territory. You cannot blindly attempt all the questions. And let me be absolutely clear here. The number of questions you attempt, that is what determines your selection. Your selection is dependent upon how many questions you attempt, number one. And number two, what is your accuracy? How accurate you are in attempting those questions. So with my experience of having given the exam, and most of the candidates who actually clear the preliminary examination, remember that 75 to 80 questions out of the 100 questions in GS paper 1 GS paper 1, 75 to 80 is a good attempt. If you have attempted 80 questions, you have done good in that paper, but with a small catch. Now, what is this catch? Remember, I am assuming that you have an accuracy of around 80%. So let's do a little mathematics. If you have attempted 75 questions with an accuracy of 80%, you end up doing 60 questions correct. Okay, 15 questions are wrong. This will cost you 5 marks. So out of the 60 marks, 5 marks will be deducted. You will get a score of 55. And barring the paper of 2014, this 1 year was an anomaly when the cutoffs actually reached 73 questions out of 100. 50% is the golden number. And this is a testimony to how difficult the prelims actually is. If you are an unreserved category candidate and you get 50 questions correct, you have, for most practical purposes, cleared the exam. If you get a 55, you should start studying for mains examination the next day of the preliminary examination. That is the extent of difficulty that you must expect from UPSC every year after year. So 50 to 55 अगर आपका score आप करते हो after negative marking, most probably, again, unless and until it is a paper which is extremely easy by UPSC standards, you will end up clearing the paper. So this is the mark that you are looking at. This is a safe attempt. अच्छा, आपको बहुत सारे आपके peers या बहुत सारे जो teachers हैं, they might give you an advice that you must attempt 90 questions or you must attempt 95 questions. Remember, it is my experience that beyond 80 questions, your accuracy drops markedly. आपकी accuracy 80 के बाद कम होने लगती है. So instead of losing 5 marks in the original calculation where you attempted 80 questions, you might end up losing 15 marks. And there is no need to touch beyond 80. Because let me be very clear, if you can't clear the paper at 80 questions, after having attempted 80 questions, chances are you will also find it extremely difficult to attempt it at 95, because as I said, accuracy will drop in a very sharp manner. So 75 to 80 is what we are targeting. We are not going in the territory where, because of our over-enthusiasm of attempting every single question, we might actually jeopardize our chances of clearing the paper. So this is the second or the third important thing that you have to keep in mind. If you do 55 questions correctly, you are going to be in. Again, remember, this is all my experience. The paper that you're going to get on the 24th may be completely different. But if it is the quality of paper that UPSC has been making for the last 5-7 years, remember, at the score of 50, you are going to be comfortably in you will clear the preliminary examination. Now coming to the next section, which I'm going to call decoding the paper. So remember that in any competitive examination, whether it is a UPSC preliminary examination, whether it is NET, whether it is CUET PG, so if there are 100 questions, you see 40% questions are easy. I remember there have been questions in UPSC, for example, what does the 10th schedule of the Constitution deal with? What is the 10th schedule of the Constitution? It was a very simple one-line response to that question. So there are also questions like that. These 40% questions are going to be easy for most of the serious candidates. What is the purpose of this question? The purpose of these questions is you eliminate the completely non-serious candidate. अब जिसने कि कुछ भी पढ़ाई नहीं करी है, बस फॉर्म भर दिया और उसको एग्जाम देने वो आ गया. सो ये 40% जो क्वेश्चंस हैं आपके, जो कि इजी कैटेगरी के क्वेश्चंस हैं, ये आपको 100% एक्यूरेसी के साथ सही करना है. Because what is the number that we're looking at? We're looking at 55. We're going to be safe. We're going to target a range of 55 to 60 correct questions after negative marking. So 40% are easy. Then around 30% questions, they are moderately difficult. How do you arrive at these questions? So these questions, whereas these 40% questions are simple facts, these are combination of facts. 2 or 3 facts will be combined to actually create one question. So these are moderately difficult questions. And depending on, again, that particular year, the nature of the paper, there are 15 to 30% questions which are not meant to be touched unless and until you're feeling very adventurous. You have a lot of confidence in your abilities. You think that I have done this. Let me do a little, let me go on a thrill ride. Let me chase some thrill. Then you attempt these questions. Now, what did I say? 40 and 30, 70. I said 75 to 80 is a good attempt. If you're feeling really adventurous, you attempt 5 of these questions. And if you find that 30% of the paper is very difficult, you stop at 75. You don't go beyond 75. Because I don't want you to spoil your chances because of negative marking. Right? And one mistake which people often do, remember, you don't have to top the preliminary examination. You just have to clear the preliminary examination. There's a very famous case, a UPSC topper, I think Tina Darby. She had cleared the prelims by 0.33 marks. And she ended up topping the examination. So remember, smart candidates, because UPSC, you will realize as you start preparing, it is an exam of strategy. It is of course an exam of knowledge, but it is most importantly, and when we make the next video on the examination process, we'll talk about strategy also. But for now, just remember, these questions are not to be tackled unless and until it somehow happens that in the ocean of books that you have studied, in the thousands of pages of newspapers that you have looked through, maybe there is a question that has directly come from your notes. Then of course, please go ahead and check it. But if there is a 50% doubt in these questions, don't attempt them. It is going to make it difficult because, as I said, accuracy in these questions is going to go down sharply with the increase in the number of attempts. What do you target then? You target these 70% questions. Again, depending on the year, these questions may go up to as high as 80%. So you target these questions. You try for an accuracy of 80%. You get a 64 score and you clear the paper. My target here is to help you clear the paper. One is not looking to top the preliminary examination, क्योंकि rank decide नहीं होगी इससे. इससे कुछ भी डिसाइड नहीं होगा, इससे बस ये डिसाइड होगा कि आप मेंस लिख रहे हो या नहीं लिख रहे हो। मेंस की स्ट्रैटेजी जब मैं आपको बताऊंगा तो वो अलग स्ट्रैटेजी है, वहां पे आपको स्कोर करना है, रैंक आपकी डिसाइड होगी। सो दिस इज समथिंग विच इज एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट एंड दैट वी रिमेंबर व्हेन वी आर अटेम्प्टिंग द पेपर। नाउ द नेक्स्ट थिंग, व्हाट एरियाज टू फोकस ऑन, किन एरियाज पे आप को ज्यादा फोकस करना है, especially in the month before the exam, 2 months before the exam. So there is of course polity, there is history, there is geography, there is current affairs, there is culture, there is economics, there is environment, there is science and technology, there is current affairs. Now again, this is my understanding, this is my experience that I have sort of got over the years. Remember, this is one of the most tricky areas to tackle the questions from, especially if you're not a student of history, especially if you have not read history in great detail. History is one area where infinite number of questions can be prepared. You cannot be 100% ready for history. So you do the basics, you do the NCERTs, you solve the previous year questions, but you don't get too deep into history, because there is, whenever, like I said, that it is a strategic examination. What do I mean by that? You have to remember the return on time. Time versus return. What do I mean by that? If you study history for 5 months, there are still going to be 10 to 15 questions which you will not be able to solve. It is not a comment on your abilities. It is simply the depth of the discipline. You know, starting from prehistoric ages down to the current period, that is, we're talking about millions of years of history. So it's very difficult to master history. So you do the basics of history, you do the NCERTs, you do modern India, which is the history of freedom struggle of India, which starts from 1857 to 1947 thoroughly. This you do extremely thoroughly. ये आपको बहुत डेप्थ में करना है. इसमें से जो क्वेश्चंस आते हैं उसमें you have to again try for an accuracy of around 85 to 90%. This is the key, because it is also easy to prepare. People who don't have a background in history can also prepare this particular area. Then there is, of course, the ancient period. And let me share this with you. I teach history. I've been studying history for more than 1.5 decades now. But even now, when I read ancient Indian history, there is some new fact which I'm not aware of. I did not know. Somehow there are so many facts in ancient Indian history, particularly in the period before the Mughals and before the Sultanate period, that I am surprised that this is something which I did not know about. So that is just the depth of the discipline. Now coming to polity, remember, polity is one of those sections of UPSC which can still be prepared from just one book, which is, of course, I'm sure all of you know, this is Lakshmikant. Lakshmikant अगर आप पढ़ लेते हो, thoroughly पढ़ लेते हो, of course it's a huge book, बहुत ही lengthy किताब है, but if you read Lakshmikant, आज भी UPSC में you can easily do 85 to 90% of the questions correctly. And मैं फिर आता हूं उस बात पे, बार बार मैं आपको ये समझा रहा हूं, this is an exam of strategy. This is not an exam of sitting and mugging everything up, because if you just do a simple count, how many subjects? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So it is very difficult to be a master of all this. And let me also be very clear, people who get selected, even they are not masters of these subjects. They have just done the strategy part correctly. तो ये सबके लिए focus area अलग अलग हो सकता है. Maybe you are very good at geography. So you make sure that if you hit a geography question, or if you hit 10 geography questions, 9 or 8 of them are going to be correct. Remember, strategy. Strategy is the key here. Of course, there are certain sections which are difficult in geography. For example, personally, I found the chapter on physical landforms to be an extremely difficult portion to cover, simply because in the NCERT, it is a huge chapter. I think it runs around somewhere in 40 to 50 pages, and questions that come from this particular section can actually be tackled if you just read that chapter a couple of times. Don't try to memorize that chapter. It will take a lot of time. So why is it important? Am I telling you to take a shortcut? No. But I'm telling you to work hard, where the time that you invest and the reward that you get, that ratio is most favorable to you. So polity is one such area. I found current affairs to be also like that. Current affairs also give you very good return. If you read the current affairs part properly, whichever magazine you follow, Vision IAS, Vajiram, whatever you follow. So these books are very nicely done. You can read the current affairs. You can read the current affairs again and again. And remember, current affairs is one section which gets carried off to the mains examination also, because the mains examination is a current affairs heavy examination. So ये बात हो गई आप किस एरिया पे फोकस करना चाहते हैं. साइंस से टेक्स्ट से जनरली क्वेश्चंस जो हैं वो करंट अफेयर्स से लिंक होके आते हैं. इकोनॉमिक्स में भी क्वेश्चंस जो हैं वो करंट अफेयर्स से लिंक होके आते हैं. इकोनॉमिक्स में देयर आर सर्टेन सेक्शंस, फॉर एग्जांपल द होलसेल प्राइस इन्फ्लेशन, द कंज्यूमर प्राइस इन्फ्लेशन, core inflation, money and banking. Now these sections are something that you could actually focus more on. ये सारा exercise करने का मतलब क्या है? That you identify your strong areas. And in the strong area, you hit an accuracy of 85 to 90%. तो आपको blindly चीजें नहीं पढ़नी है. Very quickly into the examination process, you must identify your strong areas, link it with the previous year questions, and then you start hitting those areas again and again. You master that skill that you see the question and you know the answer. Again, you cannot do that in all these areas. It is well near impossible for anyone to do that. So you master the strong areas, and this is how you define your strong area. That my accuracy is 85-90% in those areas. So this, if you plan it according to this particular strategy, the last week before the examination or the last month before the examination becomes very easy. You can finally relax during the examination because you know the strategy now. Instead of just imagine, if you want to prepare every single thing, imagine the pressure that you would be in the week before the examination, 2 weeks before the examination, 3 weeks before the examination. This makes the process slightly manageable. You will still have to study extremely hard. बहुत ज्यादा मेहनत आपको फिर भी करनी है, बट अभी आपकी जो मेहनत है उसका रिटर्न आपको ज्यादा मिलेगा. Because you've identified the areas. So this is another, most people mistake this. Most people make a mistake in not identifying their strong areas. What separates UPSC, especially the Civil Services Examination, with other competitive examination, for example, the SSC or the state, PSC examinations? What is that one thing which separates this exam, makes it slightly more, difficult, complex, is that UPSC plays with language. What do I mean by that? You see, with options like only one, both 1 and 2, none of the above, all of the above. So this is a play on language. You're not really being asked a simple fact, right? You are actually given a description of a question. Every question comes with a description. This makes it difficult because, see, you must know, and this is the difficult to the moderately difficult question here. Now, you must know more than one fact. You must know 2 facts, 3 facts, and you must read this, eliminate the wrong answers, mark the correct answer, all in the space of 2 hours. 2 घंटे में आपको ये करना है. So if you understand that one is going to face these kinds of questions, again, जब आप अपनी strong areas choose कर रहे हैं, when you are choosing your strong areas, then you decide, oh, I am going to focus on language. And are these questions extremely difficult to tackle? See, yes and no. If you have gone through enough previous year questions, you will know that one of these options is obviously wrong. So most people look at the question and they panic. So for example, there might be a question, that which of the following facts about the Indian economy are correct? And there may be option which says that the primary sector is the largest contributor to the GDP of India. Now, if you have been preparing, you know that that statement is very obviously, clearly wrong. The largest contribution to GDP in India is from the tertiary sector. So usually, again, not always, don't treat it as a rule of the thumb, but usually what will happen if in the multiple choice language-based questions, if you identify that one obviously wrong question, usually you'll be able to clear the question. Because वो options ऐसे होते हैं कि अगर आप जो obviously गलत है उसको अगर आप चुन लेते हो, so what will happen is usually you will be able to tackle the question. So remember, UPSC is different because यहाँ पे आपको कई बार question देखते ही आंसर याद आ जाएगा. But यहाँ पे you have to read the question. Read the language of the question. Understand the language of the options also. And identify the obviously wrong. And if you do that, in most cases, not always, because remember I spoke about the 15 to 30% extremely difficult questions. Or questions which I am not going to touch. उसमें हो सकता है ये trick काम ना करे. बट बाकी क्वेश्चंस में काम करेगा. और जैसा कि मैंने बोला, हमने टॉप नहीं करना है प्रीलिम्स, हमें बस प्रीलिम्स क्लियर करना है. सो लैंग्वेज को अगर आप पकड़ के चलो, इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड लैंग्वेज, इफ यू रीड लैंग्वेज, तो आपको बहुत सारी चीजें क्वेश्चन पेपर में क्लियर हो जाएंगी. और ऑब्वियसली रॉन्ग को आइडेंटिफाई करना है. अगर आपने 2 ऑब्वियसली रॉन्ग आइडेंटिफाई कर लिए, फिर तो देन देयर इज नो वे यू विल नॉट be able to mark the question correctly. Because in 4 options में से 2 obviously गलत होते हैं, 1 obviously गलत होता है. The key is to catch the obviously wrong. Once you do that, you will be able to clear this particular question. And if you apply that strategy, now I want to go back again to the strong areas. ये सबसे effectively और सबसे efficiently आप अपने strong areas में ही कर सकते हो. बिकॉज यू नो, अगर आप देखिए प्रिपरेशन का एक पर्टिकुलर प्रिपरेशन जब आप करते हो, सो यू लर्न टू आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट इज ऑब्वियसली रॉन्ग. जैसे मान लीजिए हिस्ट्री है और अकबर के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आया है, एंड द डेट ऑफ इवेंट विच इज गिवन इज द 18th century. तो ये ऑब्वियसली गलत है, बिकॉज एज वी ऑल नो अकबर का जो टाइम था वो 1605 में खत्म हो जाता है. सो ये ऑब्वियसली रॉन्ग वाली कैटेगरी में क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. तो अपने स्ट्रॉन्ग एरियाज को आइडेंटिफाई करिए, उनमें आपकी प्रैक्टिस से, आपकी प्रिपरेशन से यू विल बी एबल टू पॉसिबली डील विद दीज पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चंस. नाउ देयर इज वन इंपॉर्टेंट जो कि मैंने एक्सपीरियंस किया है, इसलिए मैं आपके साथ शेयर कर देता हूं. यू सी, पेपर्स के सीरीज होते हैं. यू नो, देयर इज सीरीज ए, बी, सी और डी. एंड दिस इज समथिंग विच स्पेशली हैपेंस विद द फर्स्ट टाइमर्स. उसमें क्या है, मान लीजिए सीरीज ए में पहले 15 क्वेश्चंस बहुत डिफिकल्ट आ गए, सो यू लूज योर कॉन्फिडेंस कि जी मेरे से तो नहीं हो रहा, मेरे तो सारे क्वेश्चंस गलत हैं. देयर आर 100 क्वेश्चंस. अगर ये 15 नहीं भी आए, विद अ कूल काम हेड यू गो थ्रू ऑल द क्वेश्चंस. और ये मैं फिर से एम्फेसाइज कर दूं, 40% क्वेश्चंस आर ऑलवेज गोइंग टू बी इजी क्वेश्चंस. वो हो सकता है वो आपकी किस्मत है कि वो पहले मिल गए या बाद में मिल गए, बट यू विल फेस दीज क्वेश्चंस. सो अपने आप को याद दिलाइए, और मेरी ये बात याद रखिए कि आगे के 40% क्वेश्चंस ऐसे होने वाले हैं जो आसान है, जो मैं कर लूंगा या मैं कर लूंगी. सो रिमेंबर, इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू रिमेंबर दिस, नॉट लूजिंग साइट, बिकॉज द फर्स्ट 15 क्वेश्चंस आर extremely difficult. So this is another thing which I have seen a lot of first timers struggle with. वो अपना कॉन्फिडेंस लूज कर जाते हैं, है ना, बिकॉज वो बहुत सारे प्री कंसीव नोशंस के साथ जा रहे हैं कि मुझे जी 90 क्वेश्चंस अटेम्प्ट करने हैं, मेरे को 70 मार्क्स लाने हैं, तो ये कट ऑफ तो इतनी जाएगी. यू डोंट नो एनी ऑफ दिस. You're going into when you're going into the examination hall, you don't know much. So you know that you have a strategy. There are strong areas you have identified. And lastly, I'm going to come to a very important part of this entire preparation journey, which is the previous year questions, PYQs. या जिनको हम मॉडल क्वेश्चंस भी कह सकते हैं. You see, the market is flooded with 10,000 test series and 15,000 coaching institutions. All of them have a model question. All of them have test series. And it's a great thing that there is so much material which is available. But again, in my experience, the model questions of the coaching institutions, they are much more difficult than the actual paper. Of course, the logic is right that if you prepare for a difficult paper, you'll be able to tackle the easy paper. But the irony is that most people, when they attempt a very tough paper, let's suppose 3 days before the exam or 7 days before the exam, you know, their confidence takes a hit. Because आपको लगता है जी मैं तो मेरा तो प्रिपरेशन खराब है क्योंकि मैं तो ये आंसर नहीं कर पा रहा हूं. तो वो जो मैंने 15 to 30% डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस बताए थे, मोस्ट मॉडल पेपर्स में ये रेशियो जो है वो 60% पहुंच चुका है कि बहुत डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन ज्यादा हैं इसमें. तो डोंट लेट योर कॉन्फिडेंस टेक अ हिट सो क्लोज टू द एग्जामिनेशन. हालांकि मेरा एडवाइस तो ये है कि आखिरी के 4-5 दिनों में आपको कुछ भी नहीं करना है. यू डोंट हैव टू डू एनीथिंग, बिकॉज द मोर यू डू, the more disheartened you get. The more disheartened you get, the more your confidence goes down. And that will, of course, obviously, like in all areas of life, that will affect your performance in the examination hall. So, क्या कह रहा हूं मैं? Am I saying कि PYQs नहीं करने? Obviously करने हैं. But just go to the UPSC website, download the previous papers, and do the official preliminary papers. Especially 3, 7, 10, 15, 30 days before the exam. इससे क्या होगा? What does this do? This is going to tell you what the UPSC actually likes to ask. क्या framing होती है questions की? और अगर if you go through, let's suppose 10 years paper and you are a decent candidate, and if you have followed the advice which has been given in the previous sections, you will see that you are easily scoring 60% in these papers. In my experience, the real confidence boost that I got before every preliminary examination is from solving the UPSC papers. And the real confidence hit that I got when my confidence was very low was when I solved a test series paper of a coaching institution. So this is something that I've arrived at, and none of these questions that are asked here are going to be here. Because UPSC is going to look for, if it has to put certain questions, if it has to put some previous year questions, it has a great repository here. So this is that one thing which people don't tell you, that in the flood of material, sometimes the most genuine material is what is right in front of your eyes. आपकी आंखों के सामने UPSC के पेपर्स जो हैं वो पड़े हुए हैं. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल UPSC जनरली स्पेसिफिक डेट्स के बारे में नहीं पूछती. हिस्टोरिकल क्वेश्चंस अगर आए हैं तो आपसे बिल्कुल पॉइंटेड क्वेश्चंस डेट्स के जनरली स्पीकिंग नहीं पूछती, unless and until it is a very well known date. But these questions will be full of such questions जिनका ओरिजिनल पेपर में स्पेस नहीं होता. Which is not to say कि ऐसे questions आ ही नहीं सकते. Of course anything can happen in the future. But अभी तक का जो एक्सपीरियंस है, अभी तक UPSC कैसे पेपर्स बनाती है, वो आप इसमें से देख सकते हो. And trust me, this is going to be a real boost to your confidence if you have done the preparation well. So that is a very important thing which I actually wanted to point out. इसमें जब आप questions देखोगे, so then you will be able to identify the 40 to 45% easy questions, the difficult questions. और at least मेरे experience में ऐसा मुझे लगा कि UPSC के जो PYQs हैं, उनका एक और बहुत important purpose है. They tell you the breadth of the question. एक broad आपको पैरामीटर मिल जाता है जिसके beyond generally speaking questions नहीं आएंगे. क्या इसका मतलब है हमेशा नहीं आएंगे? Of course not. But usually speaking, questions are not going to go there. So out of the sea of material that there is, 10 subjects, इतनी सारी किताबें, you can start to eliminate certain sources, certain topics जिनसे कि उतना रिटर्न नहीं मिलेगा. So उससे you will be able to focus on the strong areas, work with strategy, and therefore perform very well on the day of the examination. So this is all that I wanted to say to you guys. If there are any questions, you can ask me questions in the comment section of this particular video. I'm available in the college if you have something more to ask. And all the best for the paper on the 24th. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.